The first two episodes of Alien Earth finally debuted this week on FX and Hulu, and if you've been a fan of the Alien franchise like myself, this is a series you've been looking forward to for quite some time. So the big question, is it any good? Is it worth watching? I personally really dug this show. I think Noah Hawley and the entire team behind it did a really good job with these first two episodes. Hawley does a really good job of mixing the aesthetics and sound, pretty much the entire look and feel of the original Alien movie, and transporting it into this, while also adding a bunch of new stuff and tackling the age-old sci-fi question that sci-fi fans like myself always love watching on film or in television series. And that question is, when you put AI together with these synthetic kind of beings and you mix the two, what makes, a human in the end? Very similar concepts that are tackled in films like Ex Machina and the Blade Runner films. But again, I thought Noah Hawley did a really good job of blending all of those together. And that starts with the very initial opening scene. And I'm talking again about, making that the looks and feel of this, making you as the viewer feel like you're being transported back into the original Alien film. Because the show starts off on a Weyland-Yutani ship that looks like a quite literally copy and paste of the Weyland-Yutani ship, the Nostromo from the original Alien. I'm talking about the hibernation pods, the kitchen that the crew's eating in, to Mother's computer operating system room. It looks like a dead-on clone, which actually makes a ton of sense because this show, canon-wise, timeline-wise, is set 2 years before the original Alien. So this is very likely a similar ship in the same fleet that Weyland-Yutani built. So it's not all that surprising that the interior looks the exact same. The series also introduces two new type of AI robotic beings along with synths that, we're already used to synths in the previous Alien movies like Ash, the synthetic beings that are operated by AI. But in this very first scene, we're also introduced to cyborgs, which are cybernetically enhanced humans, different than synths. And we also see what are called hybrids, which are introduced after this opening carnage scene on the ship, which are synthetic beings that have the consciousness of humans transferred over to them. So back to the ship, aesthetically, sound-wise, looks exactly like the original film. So big A+ for me, again, to Noah Hawley and the entire production team behind that. It really did transport me back into feeling like I'm watching the original Alien film. Except the twist with this one, unlike the original Alien that just had the face hugger and Xenomorph on board, this one has a bunch of other alien species on board because the mission of this ship was to go get a bunch of different alien species from outer space, bring them back to Weyland-Yutani so that they can study them. But eventually chaos and naturally ensues. One of the face huggers gets on one of the crew members, a Xenomorph is born, and the Xenomorph pretty much shreds the entire crew. But the cyborg, so it kind of seems like the cyborg is in on it with the Weyland-Yutani Corp, so maybe he's kind of like the new Ash from the original Alien movie. So it'll be interesting to see how this show tackles, the type of people who wanted to become cyborgs or not, if they were forced to do it, if they were willingly went to Yutani to do this. So I'll be interested to see how that plays out throughout the show. Gore-wise, action-wise, it starts off pretty bloody with the Xenomorph. You actually see the Xenomorph pretty early in this show. For me, I enjoyed that. I like seeing that they set the tone with that originally. Some people might have a problem with that because kind of the horror element and what makes the original film so tense is that you necessarily don't see the alien so quickly. After all, it's like a big surprise when the alien pops out of the chest in the original Alien film. But again, I was okay seeing the Xenomorph early. I wanted to see the blood in action early, and I'm happy they committed to it. So the ship eventually crashes on Earth in a city called Prodigy City, and Prodigy is one of 5 companies, including Weyland-Yutani, that essentially govern and operate Earth. That's another new kind of nice introduction to keep the show fresh in this show. It's not just on Weyland-Yutani Corp. We're used to just hearing and seeing Weyland-Yutani in the Alien franchise, so it's nice to see there's 4 other kind of big corporations on Earth doing similar types of, inventions and scientific research. Prodigy specifically, we've already mentioned cyborgs and synths. Their kind of claim to fame with their boy genius CEO is they created what are called hybrids, and their CEO was able to find a technological way to transfer the human consciousness of people into synthetic beings. So that turns into this synthetic being that's, super powerful, really strong, really fast, can jump really high, but has the mind of a human behind it. And in this show, the minds of the humans in these hybrids are actually terminally ill kids. So it's back to the interesting concept again of what makes a human human. It's going to be really interesting in this show to see how this progresses. You've got these super, kind of like superhero-like physical bodies, but they're attached to these kids' minds, and you obviously see that it's kids, how they think and how they kind of move throughout the first 2 episodes. And a little nugget that they add immediately to kind of keep asking that question and give a little bit of a position in their show, and that's very likely to keep, this question so interesting to watch. One of the synths after the main hybrid, or after the main child turns into the hybrid, this is pretty much the main character of the show, Wendy. Once Wendy's in her hybrid body, she's sitting in a scene with one of the synths and a human being, and the synth very, very directly tells the human being that Wendy, this new hybrid, is not a human. So again, I'm really interested to see how they continue to tackle that story as you go, because Wendy's old memories very clearly are still affecting her, and it guides her eventually into the remainder of episode 2, where the plot and story rise, this turns into a massive search and rescue operation. Prodigy is the first company that's pretty much on the scene. They've got this health and security group that goes in, and one of the main characters in that health and security group is Wendy's brother. So via Wendy's memories, she's already invested in this search and rescue operation because she eventually finds out that her brother is in it. And on this search and rescue operation, that's pretty much where all the carnage and action picks back up again. It turns into the classic alien on board, ripping people apart. But in this one, the carnage goes back to the other alien species, which again, I thought was a really good idea to add some freshness to this. I actually think the Alien franchise has done a pretty good job of trying to add new stuff along the way throughout their new film installments. Even though some haven't necessarily landed better than others, I still give them kudos for trying to take some of these swings. And again, this is another swing that they took that worked for me, bringing the new alien species. I thought the design on some of these alien species was really freaky. I think they did a really good job of, I don't know, I'm guessing they sat in a room somewhere or maybe Googled it, what type of animals, what type of sea-like creatures, what type of insects freak people out in today's world the most. And let's carbon copy those looks and twist them up in a sci-fi alien fashion and make them our alien species. So there's a couple alien species that they introduce you in these first 2 episodes. One of them for me is one of those kind of said bug-like figures that freak me out in real life. So when that specific species comes onto scene and kind of unleashes its own type of horror chaos, that added to the nightmare fuel of the horror element for me. They definitely show the powers of the other. There's pretty much 2 main alien species that they show in this specific episode, and they show they show their new horrific traits. So depending on, like I said, if you're freaked out of what those things look like in the real world, you know exactly what I'm talking about when you see them. I don't want to give away what these species look like. But once you see them, it might add to the horror element for you and might make the hairs on your arm stand up a little bit more. Like I said, they did for me for the one specific species, and they definitely, again, they show the carnage. It gets bloody in this show. So they definitely don't hold back to all of the, gore that we're used to in the franchise. And eventually on this search and rescue operation, as Wendy's brother's in trouble, Prodigy ends up sending the entire hybrid group that they have. Not just Wendy, but the other children that turned into hybrid as well, and they call them all themselves the Lost Boys. So another kind of funny note, Disney definitely makes it known and isn't afraid to make it known in this show that they are the new owners of 20th Century Studio in this franchise, because they definitely input their IP throughout these first 2 episodes. You already have the Lost Boys and Wendy. When the kids are transferring over into these synthetic beings to become hybrids, you see essentially Peter Pan playing above them. There's also a scene where Wendy is looking at kind of like an old memory of them watching Ice Age. So just kind of funny side note that Disney flexing their chops a little bit now in their new ownership of this franchise. So the search and rescue flips back to the Xenomorph getting off the ship and kind of creating carnage in this building that they crashed in, which seems to be some type of, hotel or condo setting, because the Xenomorph then crashes a party and just creates all sorts of bloody carnage, again, just absolutely ripping people apart. And this is where Wendy and her brother eventually find each other again, and where the story ultimately kind of concludes in episode 2. So to wrap it all up again, I really enjoyed this show. Again, didn't necessarily surprise me because I'm a big fan, but I think this show really sucked me in. I'm excited to keep watching this every Tuesday night as it goes forward. I'm happy they were able to create a television series off this and not just a film, because it gives them now the runtime to tell a lot of the different stories inside of the Alien universe that we haven't really seen in the films before. Like I said, we haven't very rarely seen Earth in any of the Alien movies. We rarely see Weyland-Yutani outside of their ships and their synths in space. So it's going to be nice now to see the Earth side of it, and these big companies like Weyland and Prodigy, and eventually I'm guessing the other three will come on, and how they interact with each other, how they probably likely eventually backstab each other to gaining more and more power over the other. I'll be really interested if this show can keep its momentum. Like I said, I think it's awesome that they have a television series, but sometimes the concepts might not always work. So I'm just kind of holding my fingers crossed there on this one. And I think the show is just super accessible for everyone. I don't think you necessarily have to be an Alien fan. It would help most likely. Timeline wise, this series starts 2 years before the original Alien in the Alien universe. But again, I don't think you necessarily have to be a watcher or a fan of the original Alien films to enjoy this one. I think you can go in. Again, you could watch this on FX or stream it on Hulu. The first 2 episodes are out. It's going to be a weekly air going forward on Tuesdays. So for me, definitely recommend you give it a try. I think this will be a fun action, horror, sci-fi show to watch for people who are a fan of these genres.